I've seen scenes in Southend last night in which there were armed gangs with machetes running around. Now, I mean, people see this the whole time. There was the disorders in Leeds, was it a few weeks ago, where, you know, the authorities tried to remove some Romanian children for their own safety. There were then riots involving numerous different types of people. And there is this sense that the police generally have lost control of the streets.
It is time for our daily dip in the E. coli infested waters of news. It does feel a bit like that right now, doesn't it?
Although not. It's safe now.
Well, let's see. Taking the plunge this morning, very willingly, are Times Radio Saturday presenter Hugo Rifkind, who you can hear on weekdays at 10 a.m. on Times Radio from September. So we will no longer be a Saturday presenter. Morning to you, Hugo.
Good morning.
And the Times columnist Melanie Phillips, who's in the studio with us. Morning, Melanie.
Good morning.
As the saying goes, by the time the truth has got its boots on, it's already been kicked in the face by misinformation. What can be done to try and stop liars spreading lies about what happened in Southport from making the sort of tragedy there even worse? And we'll ask if there are any downsides for Israel in targeting the political leader of Hamas.
Plus, what is worth watching live on TV these days? And after President Macron blew more than 400 grand on dinner, is he turning into Marie Antoinette?
Such a contrast this morning. We've heard about the grief of the families and friends of the three little girls who were killed in Southport and the others who are still, of course, in a critical condition in hospital. Last night, there was a vigil where even eloquent people, it seems, were lost for words. Just hours later, though, there were thugs on the street throwing rocks and targeting a mosque. It seems to have started after misinformation online suggested that a Muslim asylum seeker was responsible. This was the reaction of the Southport MP, Patrick Hurley.
We'd had all sorts of lies being spread and misinformation being spread about the alleged perpetrator. And some people with the best of intentions, then they try to rebut this, they try to argue back. But all that happens is you're just amplifying people's false messaging. And what we saw then over the course of 24 hours from Monday afternoon up until yesterday afternoon was people, you know, this misinformation doesn't just exist on people's internet browsers and on people's phones. It has real world impact.
Now, we wanted to talk about the kind of security around these kind of things, how you stop these kind of things happening, because there'll be many, you know, parents and aunts and uncles thinking about their own children of a similar age and thinking how safe actually is it. And then we're going to go on and talk about the misinformation. Hugo, I wonder if I could start with you. I mean, you know, as a parent or not as a parent, you know, whatever. How worried are you for your own children and their safety? And actually, is there anything that could be done to stop this kind of thing from happening?
I mean, look, parents are always worried. A sort of unspeakably terrible thing happened for reasons that we don't know, and probably for reasons that would make no sense at all, and even if we did know them. Like always in these sorts of situations, society has a choice between sort of, you know, locking down and becoming impermeable and living very differently, or just sort of staring in bewildered horror and hoping this sort of thing doesn't come to your own door. I mean, I think it's important to separate the sort of bewildering attack itself from the aftermath, which is that these are two, you know, two very different horrifying things. The fact that people responded to this attack by attacking a mosque on the basis of, well, purportedly on the basis of disinformation. I mean, we can talk about the sort of disinformation that leads to this kind of thing, but we should recognise what just happened in Southport. We should recognise for what it is. This is a pogrom, right? This is an attempted pogrom. Melanie and I we're both Jewish. We know a pogrom when we see one. You think of the pogroms that hit Jewish people in the Middle Ages in Britain, often sparked off of rumours of Jewish involvement in the death of children. That's what this is. It's not a new thing. It's a really, really ancient thing, and it's horrifying. But we should recognise it as being something very familiar that does happen and has always happened.
We've jumped ahead a little bit, and I do understand actually the desire to talk about this, because this is a story that's all consuming, isn't it? Because I couldn't stop thinking about it from the moment that I heard about it, because I've got a 9-year-old daughter. She's going to a holiday club next week, and things start to go through your mind. And then what happened last night? Let's just go through it a little bit before I come to you, Melanie. Another element here is how some people take advantage of horrific crimes like this for their own agendas. And in this instance, soon after the news emerged, conspiracy theories from far-right groups started blaming Muslims for the attack. There was a false rumour that started that it was a Muslim asylum seeker. Now, Marcus Beard is a misinformation expert. He's a former Number 10 advisor. And he explained that in certain cases, information isn't shared, and told us how to avoid misinformation from spreading.
There is certainly a case to be made for communicating why the information isn't shared in the spaces where this misinformation spreads. I think often the advice I give to people who are worried they're consuming misinformation is to check kind of trusted sources, go to websites like The Times, look at trusted news websites. But now I think actually everyone needs to do a lot better at getting into these spaces where misinformation spreads, whether that's Telegram, these groups on Twitter, and making that case and saying if they don't, saying what information they have, but if they can't share that information, really explaining why, because often the way this stuff gets reported can be quite hard to understand.
Melanie, what do you make of the rumours that started online that were kind of made flesh in the devastation of a community, actually, because the whole place is absolutely gutted this morning? Is there anything we can do in the modern age to stop that from happening?
I think you're absolutely right to say that terrible tragedies are leapt upon and exploited by people with a number of different agendas. And we see this all the time. And what happened in the Southport atrocity was unspeakable. I mean, you can't imagine a worse thing than tiny children being randomly and inexplicably attacked like this and murdered. And that obviously, produces tremendous passions of rage and grief and so on, which are in any event virtually unstoppable. And that's from decent people. But then you have the pernicious element of social media. And I was watching all this, I was reading all this yesterday, and it was absolutely overwhelming, because no sooner had we tried to digest the appalling reality of what had happened in Southport, then you saw that I saw, and we all saw, we were reading social media, we were reading Twitter, these people, whoever they were, producing a name, which we are told was false, producing allegations that he was a Syrian refugee, a Syrian asylum seeker, producing allegations that he was on an MI6 watch list. And these allegations were coming from what we now read were possibly Russian bots or AI-generated whatevers. But I was also seeing known influencers producing all this and reproducing it. Now, those people are perfectly ordinary journalists, commentators. They were behaving with extreme, to put it mildly, irresponsibility. They had no idea of the veracity of what they were putting out, and we now are told it was completely false, and it produced these terrible mob attack events which happened. How you deal with this is a very difficult matter.
Well, first of all, those people that you're talking about, should they? I mean, they probably don't care, but should they be asked questions? Should they be held to account?
Yes, I think they should be held to account. I've never believed in censoring media. I understand entirely the impulse which says you've got to stop all this from being transmitted at all. You've got to pass laws. I think that rebounds in a free society. You end up prohibiting what you should not be prohibiting. But in a free society, we are all entitled to say these named people have behaved appallingly and disgracefully, and nobody should give them the time of day.
Hugo, what do you do with people like that? Because do they kind of... how much do they care? Are they doing it for clicks? Or how much do they care about the fact that they said something, it led to a reaction, and do they just walk away from it and nothing happens? Or actually, do we hold them more to account?
Well, I think to start with, I think there's a bit of a comfort zone in considering them really to be the problem. I mean, look, misinformation is a real scourge of modern society. I've written a huge amount about it. I've covered it quite intently. Most normal people, nonetheless, if you hear that an attack like this has occurred and you're told that and you're told rightly or wrongly, and in this case absolutely wrongly, that the perpetrator was Muslim, was a Syrian asylum seeker, was whatever, most normal people do not respond to that by marching on a mosque, right? So there's a big gap in the narrative there. We can bewail the misinformation, and we should, and I'll come to that in just a moment.
Yeah.
But there's a real social there's a real hole in the narrative there, that there's a social problem that is not directly connected to that. Misinformation needs fertile ground in which to spread, and the fertile ground is something that we should worry about an awful lot. In terms of the misinformation itself, then yes, absolutely. I mean, I find it staggering that there's anybody in any position of influence who hasn't learned by now that you don't spread rumors, that you don't leap upon things just because you feel they confirm your worldview, that you don't tweet and communicate. I mean, if you think of the care we take on the radio, and certainly take in the newspaper as well, not to do this stuff. The early reports come in. If you deliver them at all, you deliver them with extreme caveats. You distance yourself from anything that cannot be confirmed, because we've learned this stuff has impact.
Well, of course, but the thing is, Hugo, and you'll know this yourself because you will have seen people, below the line or texting, and they believe that your reluctance to bring the facts out is because it's a dishonesty. You're keeping something from us rather than being cautious. And so it's a journalistic gap, a perceived gap. And also when it comes to the police as well, a lot of people are saying, well, actually, it might help if the police caught up a little bit in the social media age and put more information out a bit earlier.
It might, sure, it might. But I mean, all people, like, all we can do is repeat the caveats again and again and again. And people have just got to learn. That is the only way a society functions, is that people learn. I mean, all kind of advancements in technology have led to waves of unrest as people have grappled with trying to understand what this new rush of information means to them. From people running out of cinemas when they saw a steam train coming, to the kind of the unrest that followed, the printing press, broadcast radio. And the same is sort of happening on the internet. People have not yet adapted and not able to cope with the rush of information, with quantifying that information. People have just got to learn.
Melanie?
I think there's another element to this. I mean, there are known and named groups that are busy exploiting these kind of situations, of which we saw yesterday the English Defence League was amongst them. But I think there's a more general problem here. The police immediately said, as soon as they could, this guy was born in Cardiff. And I saw on social media, everyone went, yeah, right, as if that means anything. Because people no longer believe the police. Now, why don't they believe the police? Because we're living in a society which, unfortunately, for many years, the police have kind of lost control of what people think should be controlled on the streets, mass disorder. For example, yesterday, and I've not seen this in the mainstream media today, and maybe it didn't happen, but I've seen scenes in Southend last night in which there were armed gangs with machetes running around. Now, I mean, people see this the whole time. There was the disorders in Leeds, was it a few weeks ago, where, the authorities tried to remove some Romanian children for their own safety. There were then riots involving numerous different types of people. And there is this sense that the police generally have lost control of the streets, that disorder is now kind of becoming a way of life, that you have different sections of the community all reacting against each other with nobody actually able to stop that.
Just on the point about saying that he was that this suspect was born in Cardiff, I presumed that was to counter the information that was being shared online that he was an asylum seeker.
That's right, yes. But I could see that people were saying,
yes,
so what? We all know that there are homegrown Islamists. That doesn't prove anything. And in a culture where you basically disbelieve the police now because you disbelieve anybody in authority, and I'm afraid that's where we've got to.
Yeah. Well, many people have been saying that.
Just a bit of breaking news to bring you. The former BBC broadcaster Huw Edwards has arrived at Westminster Magistrates Court. You'll know from hearing it in the news in the past couple of days. He's alleged to have committed 3 offences between December 2020 and April 2022. He's accused of having had 37 photographs on WhatsApp, including 6 of the most serious type. The charge which he's appearing in court is the charge of making indecent images of children. There's currently quite a large press pack outside Westminster Magistrates Court in central London, and quite a large police presence as well. Any news out of that hearing, we'll bring it to you straight away. Let's turn to a different story which we've been discussing this morning. What has been happening in Tehran? One of Hamas's main leaders, that their political leader Ismail Haniyeh, has been killed. Hamas blame Israel. Israel haven't said anything as yet. Melanie, what do you make of this? Israel has always said it'll go after Hamas's leadership. Do you think this could undermine what they're trying to do with a ceasefire negotiation, though?
I think this is, well, first of all, we don't absolutely know what happened, but I assume this is an Israeli assassination. If that is the case, this is an astounding development in terms of the skill and intelligence involved. They got underneath the Iranian anti-Israeli aircraft defenses to kill somebody in Tehran, in the center, in the capital of Iran. Now, if this was the case, this achieved two very important effects. One was to take out one of the principal leaders of Hamas. They've now taken out two of the three, leaving only Sinwar allegedly in his tunnels under Gaza. But they struck within Tehran. And this gives a message to Iran that we're coming up, we can come after you at any time. We can kill any of you at any time. Now, people in Britain possibly don't realize this, but Iran is where this is all at. This is not a fight. This is not a war between Israel and Hamas or Israel and Hezbollah as sort of limited regional wars. This is a war waged by Iran against Israel. Iran has taken has taken the strategic decision, as it were, to, if I can use a metaphor, to boil Israel like boiling frogs in a pot. You surround Israel by a ring of fire. Israel is being attacked currently by 7 different Iranian-backed fronts, and you watch them slowly boil. And you basically divide Israel, so, you know, the northern Israel is uninhabitable. You shrink Israel. Southern Israel is virtually uninhabitable, parts of it. And you terrorize the population. You keep attacking them. You keep the missiles and the bombs and the rockets coming. And you wear them down by attrition, because you know that if they actually respond as Britain would respond in these circumstances, with thousands of missiles attacking them, as America would certainly did respond after one of these attacks, 9/11, they know that if Israel does that, then Hezbollah can unleash 150,000 missiles and rockets, which can cover all of Israel, and you have skyscrapers falling in Haifa and in Tel Aviv. Nobody wants that. So this is the first time that Israel has actually hit Iran. Now, many in Israel would say about time too, because this whole terrible war going on now for 10 months could have been stopped from the start had America said to Iran, we understand your game, we are not having it. But unfortunately, America has taken the path of appeasement, hence this terrible war.
Do you worry about where this could escalate to, though?
Absolutely. Yeah. I worry that it is escalating. People in the West only ever talk about escalation when Israel takes measures to defend itself. From Israel's point of view, this has been escalating for 10 months. Northern Israel has been on fire. People are constantly being bombarded. Israelis are constantly dying. Nobody talked about escalation in the West when these 12 Druze children were massacred. Nobody said that was an escalation.
There was talk of
it's only an escalation when Israel responds. But of course,
there was
everybody
to be fair, there was talk of escalation when Iran launched that sort of, you know, amazing sort of wave of drones.
Well,
that came
immediately,
yeah.
Israel was told not to escalate by hitting Iran. The fact is, of course, nobody wants this war to increase. Nobody wants any more death or destruction anywhere. Everybody wants it to stop.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's a sort of elementary common sense perception, surely, that you don't end a war by appeasing and ignoring the people who are actually behind it.
Hugo?
Yeah, I mean, Melanie's of course entirely right that a lot of what we're seeing at the moment in the Middle East is a proxy war between Iran and Israel. And we saw the Iranian rocket attack a few months ago. The Israeli response to that was, I think, the first time they'd bombed Iranian soil. They've now done again in Tehran. But I mean, it's not just a proxy war. Haniyeh himself. He was the political leader of Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization, and he was in charge of Hamas. But he was also a politician, not a general. He was at one point the Palestinian prime minister, albeit briefly. And I mean, if he lived for the most part in Doha. He was involved in negotiating a ceasefire. If you want a ceasefire, these are the people you need to make a ceasefire with. And if you kill them, that does get harder. And Israel has this long-running policy of killing the people who they deem to be behind attacks. And I mean, and in this case, obviously not just deem, because he was indeed, a Hamas leader, even if he wasn't, we think, involved personally in the planning of the October the 7th attacks. But Israel has this long-running policy of killing those who attack it in order to deter the next people from attacking it. And over the last 50 years, that kind of hasn't really worked. And sooner or later, you've got to find somebody to negotiate with. And Israel remains more or less committed to wipe out anybody it might negotiate with. And so I think this inevitably pushes a ceasefire further away, with the caveat being that I don't think one was particularly close in the first place.
Yes.
The Chancellor has admitted that taxes will go up in her first autumn budget, but Rachel Reeves has ruled out increases to income tax and national insurance, presumably VAT as well. That was a list that we had before the election. Hugo Rifkind, I don't know if you saw the clip in which she was kind of pressurised into answering, but taxes are going to go up, taxes are going to go up. And she did this thing where she said, well, I think, yes, taxes are going to have to go up. So is this kind of what we thought was going to happen all along, or what do you make of it? What does it actually mean?
Yeah, I mean, an incoming Labour government raises taxes, and also the bears defecate in the woods. It's not wildly surprising. They did rule out in the election, various forms of taxes. They kept saying taxes on working people, yeah, which meant basically, I think, national insurance and income tax. And so it was widely expected during the election we're going to see a rise in things like perhaps inheritance tax, capital gains tax. Maybe they'll think of some exciting new taxes for us as well. I think the strategy of blaming it all on Jeremy Hunt seems a bit harsh, I would say, because remember Jeremy Hunt was having a quiet and peaceful life on the back benches before he was brought back in to sort of fix the mess made by Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, following on from the mess made by Boris Johnson. I think sort of placing it all at his door is a tad mean. But yes, I do think there are tax rises ahead. I think also interestingly, I'm not quite sure where the electorate is right now about tax rises. We instinctively think that everybody hates the idea of tax rises, and certainly, personally, not wild about them as far as they impact me. But I do think there's a sort of public sense that, I mean, you do get a sense that a lot of people think, actually, you know what, maybe taxes should be quite a lot higher, albeit just not for me.
Yes, I remember, during the election campaign, there was definitely a group of people who would constantly text saying, I would be willing to pay a little bit more tax, national insurance, whatever it is, for the NHS, for social care. I don't know what those people think now. Melanie, it was interesting because we know, because we heard it every day, the particular mantra that came from Labour, which was, we're not going to increase these taxes, which they listed all the time on working people. And then when you ask them about capital gains tax, inheritance tax, etc., there's nothing in our manifesto that means that they would have to go up. But they can easily say, as all governments can, well, we've opened the books now, and
yeah. I mean,
now there is something that needs to be addressed.
I think few during the election campaign thought they were anything other than deliberately slippery. Few have been under any illusions that they would raise taxes. What I think gets people a little bit, nauseous is the dishonesty. People really don't like politicians to be dishonest. And I think Rachel Reeves is in great danger of having the nation's teeth really being set on edge if she says again, I was so shocked. So shocked. I mean, everyone's going, you've got to be kidding me. You can't be that wet behind the ears. You are having us on. And it's the oldest trick in the book to say, you know, we didn't want to do this, but we've been forced by this situation. It's absolute nonsense.
But the IFS agree with her to some extent, don't they, that there was some new stuff in there?
To some extent, but Paul Johnson wrote a piece in the Times yesterday saying only to some extent. I think everyone was surprised by the little black hole of the asylum bill, whatever. But the fact is that, you know, having been so shocked by this black hole, she then goes and splurges $9 billion on public sector pay rises, which happen to benefit people who are Labour Party supporters. I mean, you can't on the one hand say, I was so shocked and my hands are now tied and I would love to give the winter fuel payment to old people and I would love to invest in social care. These are worthy tasks. I cannot do them. But here's £9 billion for our paymasters. I mean, people are surely going to go, what?
Well, some people have, and some people have said, well, at least we're not going to have any strikes anymore. It's very much a double-edged thing.
Well, everyone's got this now for 5 years, folks.
Let us move on to a lighter topic. Scheduled television. Young people are watching less of it. Ofcom has found that fewer than half of young people aged 16 to 24 tune into a live TV programme in an average week. That is down from 76% in 2018. Is this something that we should mourn, or is it just the way of the world? Hugo, with your TV hat on, are you sad about this or not?
I'm not sure how often I watch live TV. I was thinking about this. I mean, I watch the news, obviously, and there's occasional landmarks like sort of Strictly or Traitors.
Hang on. You know, when you say you watch the news, what do you mean? You mean like the bulletin of record at the end of the day?
Yeah, sure. I'll sometimes watch the 10 o'clock news, or or things like that. And I'll watch Strictly or Traitors. You know, things with Claudia Winkleman in them. I'll watch them live. Seems to be for some reason. I was thinking about this. I was thinking even with the Olympics at the moment, I've been more liable, even with my family, to sort of browse what's available through the on-demand services rather than switch on even the highlights and see what's going on. It's an evolving medium. You know, there's no particular reason to watch TV live unless it's some particular live event that you are watching live, a sports match, for example. You know, I mean, there's no reason at all to consume drama live, and many people don't. I think, I mean, the only downside to it is a sort of a sort of social fragmenting of the cultural experience. There is something nice about knowing that you're watching a thing, and in every other house, everybody else is watching a thing. Yes. But then that made more sense when there were like sort of 4 channels, 3 channels, even 5 channels. Whereas when there's now sort of 270 channels, it's a bit of a. I mean, like a hit TV show these days will get sort of 2 million viewers on a night. It's we're no longer in the days of 20 million viewers on a night. So it's a bit different anyway.
You do lose the nice situation though, which someone texted in a little bit earlier on, where you have a whole family watching television together and they all watch Love Island because of the younger person, and they all have to watch 10 o'clock news because of the parent, and they just all do that. Melanie, what about you? Do you sit down with the TV Times of an evening and see what terrestrial friends have for you?
I can't say I do that, no. I don't think I've watched live TV for a very long time, and I don't watch many TV programmes because I don't find much of value anymore. I mean, it would be nice to say, it's a good thing that people are not watching, especially young people, not watching so much TV because instead they are reading improving books. Unfortunately, I don't think that's the alternative that's on offer. I think they're going on to pernicious social media and TikTok. So what's replacing it is not good either. But I think that, it's perfectly correct. This is a fragmentation of culture. TV once was a great unifier and played a very important part. And not just unified the country, but actually elevated it. I mean, this was the great days of the BBC when it had a sense of its mission to elevate public taste and public behaviour. And that has gone, for a long time. So, I mean, we're in the Wild West now. We have to get used to it.
With TV having lost that status of being the great unifier of the nation, I think the baton must once again, of course, return to live radio.
Oh, beautifully done, Hugo. Yes.
It's that kind of smooth transition you can enjoy when Hugo gives up his Saturday job for full time, Monday to Thursday at 10 a.m. That starts in September, and of course you can have more Melanie in the comment pages of the Times and at thetimes.com. Melanie, Hugo, good to talk to you both. Thank